You're 7 years old, it's a Tuesday morning, and instead of playing, instead of exploring, creating, asking questions that actually matter to you, you're told to sit in a plastic chair, stare at a chalkboard, and memorize the year that Columbus sailed to America. And if you don't sit still, if you get distracted, if you ask too many questions, you get a bad grade, a note sent home, maybe a diagnosis. Here's what nobody ever told you. That feeling of being trapped, that restlessness, that boredom, that nagging sense that something was wrong wasn't a problem with you. It was a problem with the room. Because for 300,000 years, humans learned without classrooms, without grades, without bells. And then, about 200 years ago, someone decided to change all of that. Not for your benefit, for theirs. How children actually learn. Let's go back, way back. Before electricity, before agriculture, before civilization as we know it. For the overwhelming majority of human existence, children didn't go to school. There was no school. And yet, somehow, humanity survived, innovated, and thrived. So how did kids actually learn? In 2011, anthropologist Peter Gray published a landmark study on children in hunter-gatherer societies. He looked at the Hadza in Tanzania, the Kum in the Kalahari, indigenous communities across South America, and he found something remarkable. Children in these societies had almost unlimited free time. They weren't taught in the traditional sense. They played all day, every day. But here's the thing, that play wasn't random. They built tools by watching adults and copying them. They learned to track animals by actually tracking animals. They resolved conflicts, negotiated, cooperated, because they had to. Real consequences, real stakes, real learning. And the science backs this up. Dr. Stuart Brown at the National Institute for Play found that play is the primary mechanism through which the mammalian brain develops. When young animals are deprived of play, including human animals, their prefrontal cortex develops differently. They become worse at problem solving, worse at emotional regulation, worse at creativity. The brain literally rewires itself based on whether it gets to play or not. Here's a number that should stop you cold. The average American child today spends less than 30 minutes of unstructured outdoor play per day. In the 1980s, it was 3 hours. We didn't just reduce play, we nearly eliminated it. The invention of school. So where did school come from? Most people assume schools were invented to educate people, to lift the poor, to create opportunity. That's the story we were told. Here's what actually happened. It's the early 1800s. The Industrial Revolution is exploding across Europe and America. Factories are running 16-hour shifts. Children, some as young as 5, are working in mines and mills. And factory owners have a problem. Their workers are unreliable. They show up late. They take breaks when they want. They quit without warning. They haven't been conditioned to obey a clock. So, in 1806, a Prussian king named Frederick William III introduced something new: compulsory, state-mandated schooling for every child. And the explicit goal, this isn't conspiracy, this is in the historical documents, was to create what Prussian education reformer Johann Gottlieb Fischer called a new kind of human being, one who would be obedient, one who would follow instructions without question, one who would be useful to the state. America looked at the Prussian model and said, perfect. Horace Mann, the father of American public education, traveled to Prussia in 1843 and came back evangelizing their system. He didn't design schools around how children learn, he designed them around how factories run. Think about it. The school bell? That's a shift change. The rows of desks? That's an assembly line. Grades? That's quality control. Summer off? That used to be harvest season, so children could work the fields. Even the subjects were chosen deliberately. Reading, writing, and arithmetic, the minimum you need to follow written instructions and handle basic transactions. Creativity? Dangerous. Workers who think too much ask for raises. Philosophy? Useless. Workers who question authority cause problems. Music, art, physical movement, distractions. The system wasn't designed to help you discover who you are. It was designed to make you useful to someone else. What the science says now. Here's where it gets really uncomfortable, because we now have 100 years of psychology, neuroscience, and education research, and almost all of it points in the same direction. Traditional schooling is doing real harm. In 2010, education researcher Ken Robinson, whose TED Talk is the most watched in TED history, published a study showing that standardized schooling reduces creativity scores over time. When researchers tested kindergartners for divergent thinking, the ability to generate multiple creative solutions to a problem, 98% scored at genius level. They tested the same children 5 years later. Genius level, 32%. 5 years after that, 12%. By adulthood, 2%. The school system didn't discover your limitations. It created them. And there's more. Peter Gray, the same anthropologist who studied hunter-gatherer children, has been tracking a rising mental health crisis in American kids that directly correlates with the decline of free play and the rise of academic pressure. Since 1960, the era when schools started getting more rigorous, more standardized, more test-focused, rates of childhood anxiety and depression have risen fivefold, 5 times. Not genetics, not social media. The correlation is with the loss of autonomy. When children are given control over their own learning, when they get to choose what to explore, how to explore it, and how long to spend on it, something remarkable happens. They don't stop learning. They go deeper. There are now hundreds of free schools and democratic schools across the US, places like the Sudbury Valley School in Massachusetts, where children set their own curriculum. They decide what to study, how, and when. Adults are available as mentors and resources. The results are striking. Students graduate with higher rates of college completion, higher job satisfaction, and by every psychological measure, more self-direction, more resilience, more creativity. Because they never had their natural learning drive beaten out of them. Here's what I want you to sit with. The thing you were told was your character, your restlessness, the wandering mind, your resistance to sitting still and paying attention to things that felt meaningless. That wasn't a flaw. That was the most human thing about you. Curiosity is not a phase you grow out of. It's a survival mechanism, 300,000 years in the making. The ability to be bored, to feel the wrongness of doing something pointless, is not laziness. It's your brain protecting its own potential. The need to move, to build, to create, to connect with other people, that's not immaturity. That's the biological blueprint for learning. We took a species designed to explore and asked it to sit still. We took creatures built for play and called it work. We took curious minds and handed them standardized tests. And then we wondered why so many adults feel lost. Why so many people hate their jobs. Why creativity feels like a luxury. Why learning feels like punishment. It's not because something is wrong with you. It's because you were put in a box designed for someone else. The good news? The box isn't permanent. Understanding where it came from is the first step to escaping it. The curiosity you were born with, it's still there. It didn't die. It got buried under years of being told your ideas were wrong, your interests were impractical, your way of thinking didn't fit the rubric. But it's there, underneath all of it. The fact that you're watching this video, that you're curious enough about human history and psychology to spend 10 minutes thinking about why the world works the way it does, That's not an accident. That's what humans are supposed to do. Ask questions. Chase what matters. Learn because they want to, not because a bell rang.